Okay, so in last week's inaugural episode of the Practice Corner, we specifically focused as a prerequisite on how to sit with the guitar. If you haven't seen the episode already, I highly recommend you go and check it out. It should be in this corner here or this corner here as a link. In this particular episode, I would like to specifically focus now on just the right hand. So I mentioned in that first episode what type of pick I use for at least strumming to begin with, and I use I would recommend at least a USA nylon gin Dunlop as a 0.46mm because it's nice and thin, so it glides off the strings when you strum the chords. You don't have to. This is just what I recommend. You can use whatever you like. You can use thicker picks if you can find, which are also more common. You'll get a more heavier sort of sound with that. Or you can find even thinner picks. Believe it or not, there are some out there. Also, the material is worth considering as well. So obviously nylon is one I like because there's a grip so that it sticks to the fingers, so that you don't have to worry too much about it falling out or falling into the sound hole, which is very nice because then you end up having a maraca. Or if you drop a pick, it ends up dropping into another dimension. So plastic picks are obviously typically very good, get a nice sound out of them. But it's whatever makes you feel comfortable. Some people strum just with the fingers. So another thing to consider as well is when strumming. So if you simply take this hand here and just rest them without fretting any notes, and basically focus primarily on the pick itself and how you hold the pick if you're strumming. So I typically hold it in between the thumb and the index finger like such. As you can see, that they're sort of perpendicular to each other really when you look at the pick. Not quite holding that sort of straight ideally really, but they're sort of somewhat like perpendicular. So if you look at the thumb and index finger, they're like forming a right angle. Yes, they are a right angle to that of the pick pointing down, or the sharp end of the pick. And you ideally want to be quite relaxed, so you're resting the arm over the kind of most bulbous end of the guitar, if you like, really. And because we're not playing lead, you'd have a very locked in position, but because we're playing just strumming, you can be very relaxed and have a nice, wrist, as you can see there, it's very loose and relaxed. And generally, you can sort of feather these out if you want to a little bit to kind of get a nice sort of, treat it like you're feathering the guitar, you're strumming the guitar with a feather in a way, really. So when you do this, one thing in this episode later on in particular is that we will be looking at strumming patterns. So a good way of practicing strumming is to rest these without fretting and focus just on this side. So these are just some tips to bear in mind as we progress through this lesson and indeed this lesson series. So in last week's episode of the Practice Corner, we looked at open major chords. These are called open chords because they feature an open string or a string that is not fretted with the fretting hand as the strings resonate together upon striking them. So these chords were C major, D major, E major, G major, 3 variants of that one, and A major. In this week's episode, we're going to continue looking at open chords, other than this time we are now going to look at the minor chords. It's not as intensive as last week, and there are only 3 that we're going to look at for the time being, and these are going to be D minor, E minor, and A minor. Minor chords are typically denoted with a min on the end of them. So for example, when they're a major chord, they are basically just the letter initial, therefore it is just the major chord. In this instance here, we have the minor form of that major chord, or D minor if you like. This is min, or sometimes, I'm not sure whether or not min is official, whether or not it's just something I picked up along the way of learning or whatever from shorthand from other guitar players or musicians. But also it can be denoted with a lowercase m or in certain jazz standards I have seen often a superscript. I think it's a superscript anyway, a minor sign to denote the minor equivalent of that chord. So without further ado, let's just get to the practice corner to look at these chords. So last week we looked at the open major chords. Now remember, our major chords have open strings, or strings that are not fretted by the fretting hand, hence making them open chords. This week we're going to look at the open minor chords, and we're going to look at three in particular. These are D minor, E minor and A minor. So again, you'll notice a very similar shape to that of their major counterpart too as well when we're looking through them. Another thing about this lesson is I hope to have a picture in either of these corners, preferably this one, of the chord shape. So I know I posted a post, whatever, last week on my channel with the diagrams. Here I want them in the actual video, and I think you can do it, so I'm hoping they're going to appear here, hand drawn of course for the authenticity. But to begin with, let's have a look at D minor. So D minor, much like D major, has an open D. You then take your second finger and place this on the second fret of the G string to get you an A. You then take the third finger and place this on the third fret of the B string to get you a D. This time, already the fingering is slightly different, of course, compared to D major. But we now take our index finger and we place this on the first fret of the E string to give us an F note. So, together, well, individually, these will sound like this when plucked. And when we strum them, it will sound like this. So notice how sad it sounds compared to D major. Left my tuner on there, silly me. That's one thing to bear in mind as well, is always make sure you turn your tuner off, otherwise you'll go through a lot of batteries. So our next chord is now going to be an E minor, and surprise, surprise, much similar to the D. It's a very similar shape to the E major. In fact, it is practically identical, only we do not we do not use our index finger to fret the G sharp on the third string first fret. So we have an open E. We then have the second finger on the second fret of the A string to give us a B. We then take the third finger and tuck that underneath that on the second fret of the D string to give us an E. As described, the G string is now open to give us a G, so we don't play the G sharp like for an E major, but leave this finger off. And again, the B and E are also open. So individually, these will sound like this. And strummed, the E minor will sound like this. Again, you can compare how sad that sounds compared to that of E major. We do E minor. Our last chord for this week is going to be an open minor chord. It's going to be A minor. Again, for the A minor, we looked at using one finger, so the index finger, to fret all of them. In this one, we use individual strings. So individual fingers. Sorry. I should really practice this and script it, shouldn't I? So we have an open A. We then use the second finger and put this on the second fret of the D string to give us an E. We then take the third finger and place this just underneath that on the second fret of the G string to give us an A. We then take the index finger and place this on the first fret of the B string to give us a C. And finally, the E string is open. Individually, for an A minor chord, these will sound like this. Collectively, the chord will sound like this. And again, it sounds sad compared to that of A major. Okay, so now that we are aware of both open, major and minor chords, let's have a practice of some progressions. So last week we looked at major progressions. This week let's combine the two of them. So in the first one, I want you to focus on a progression which features 2 bars of A minor, then going to 1 bar of C major, finishing on 1 bar of G major. But I now want you specifically to start focusing on strumming. So for example, here, if I just move out the way slightly, I have drawn a strumming pattern. And in this case, this is an 8th note strumming pattern. So every bar will have 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, which I have drawn here. And above this is the strumming attack pattern. So if you remember back to your lesson on conical, I did for Back to the Drawing Board. If you haven't already, please check that out. I will link at the top corner. This would sound a lot like this. So you'd have a ta note, taka, on the second beat of this bar, followed by a skip on the third beat, but then a kataka ta. So ta, taka, ketaka ta, taka, ketaka ta, kata, ketaka ta, taka, ketaka. This is best demonstrated when we get to the practice corner and discuss this more about what the right hand technique is doing. Okay, so for the final part of today's practice corner lesson, we're going to look at some simple strumming patterns in 8th note fashion. So in this one, we're going to take the outline progression for the first down, down, up approach that we outlined on the drawing board. Pay particular attention to what we said at the beginning of the lesson of strumming technique with this hand. We've got a metronome going at 95 BPM, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we apply our conical to this, or simply say down, down, up, we should get this 1, 2, 3, 4. Down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. Let's have a go at that now. 3, 4. Okay, so in our second example, we're now going to look at a progression that contains a split measure. So a split measure is when the chord changes halfway through the bar. In fact, it doesn't always have to happen halfway through the bar. It can happen on a beat that is non-symmetrical, so maybe on the 4th beat, or perhaps even on the 2nd beat, or halfway through a beat in the bar. So in this simple example here, we have the chord changing halfway through. And this example here will feature an A minor play for 2 beats, to then a G, and then onto a D minor for 4 beats. The strumming pattern I want you to try and play for this next one is, again, a simple 8th note strumming pattern where we play 2 downstrokes on E minor, and then for the second bit here we should be playing or fretting the G major chord. So this will sound a lot like this. Ta, ta, taka, taka, ta, ta, taka, taka, ta, ta, taka, taka, ta, ta, taka, taka. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and. So again, just bear in mind as well, if you're finding this too hard, practice just getting the chords first, changing the chords with your fretting hand, and once you're comfortable with that, then move on to these strumming patterns. Or if you want to, do the muting technique with the fretting hand and work on the strumming hand, strumming pattern. And then once you're happy with these, get them two coordinated together. So let's demonstrate that back at the practice corner. Our final example that we discussed on the drawing board featured a split measure. This took the form of the following: down, 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 up, or ta, ta, taka, taka. If we were to just mute the strings with our fretting hand for the time being and apply this with our strumming hand, this will sound like this. So when we apply the progression, it should sound like this. 3, 4. Let's wrap up the lesson at the drawing board. In last week's episode, I said that chords can change during a song, thus telling a story. Well, the rhythm can also change during a song as well, thus telling a rhythmic story. So for your homework, I would like you to have a go at doing this progression. Before I go on, by the way, I should mention these dots represent repeat markers, meaning repeat till ad infinitum, or until you get bored or your fingers get tired. So in this one, I want you to pay particular attention to the strumming pattern. So these are split measures involving E major, A minor, C major to A minor, and then repeating again back to E major. But in this instance, we're taking a strumming pattern we've already focused on in this lesson. So down, down, up, down, up, ta, taka, ka, taka. And then in the second bar, I want you to go ta, taka, ta, taka. So do you feel like there's this sort of story going on there? Da, da, ka, ka, ta, ka, ta, da, ka, ta, da, ka, ta, da, ka, ka, ta, ka, ta, da, ka, ta, da, ka, ta. So sonically as well as rhythmically, there's an evolving story. Again, to take home, if I'm to give you one message from this lesson, is to basically be aware of both left hand and right hand technique. Like I say, don't get too disparaged if you struggle with one hand and not the other, or one's working faster than the other. Focus on one for the time being until you get so comfortable doing it you don't need to think, and then apply the other hand. And I guarantee you, with a bit of perseverance, you'll be playing this within 1 or 2 weeks, no problem, with half an hour a day or so. Anyway, I do hope you've enjoyed this lesson. It may seem like there's a lot more there to build upon from what we've had before, but trust me, this is really simple stuff. With perseverance, you'll be able to get this in absolute no time. In next week's episode, or whenever I get the chance to do the episode, we're going to look at the final form of, the penultimate form of chord, and that's bar chords. So until then, happy practicing and bye-bye.